The Library of Congress is the home of more than 170 million items, including the photographs, letters, and other writings by one of America's greatest architects of all time, Frank Lloyd Wright. Hello, I'm Roswell Encina. Welcome to a new conversation, part of our book series called Made at the Library. It's a behind-the-scenes series on how authors use the library's collection in researching their books. Over the library's more than 220-year history, thousands of books have been written based on the manuscripts, maps, photographs, historic newspapers, sound recordings, films, and of course books waiting to be discovered and interpreted for readers like you and me. Today, I'm pleased to bring you a conversation with historian, journalist, and professor Paul Hendrickson. Paul is the extraordinary author of such works as Sons of Mississippi, A Story of Race and Its Legacy, Hemingway's Boat, Everything He Loved in Life and Lost, and most recently, Plagued by Fire, The Dreams and Furies of Frank Lloyd Wright. Please welcome Paul Hendrickson. Paul Hendrickson, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
It's great seeing you. Now, Frank Lloyd Wright is regarded as one of the greatest architects of all time. There's so much has been written about him. You see coffee table books, you see postcards, you see posters, you see keychains, you see a lot of tchotchke about his work. But why did you decide to write about it?
That's a wonderful question, and as soon as I figure out the answer, I'll be sure and let you know. Sorry for the smart aleck answer. Part of the reason is I grew up in a little downstate Illinois town called Kankakee, downstate in that it was 50 miles below Chicago, and in the 1950s, 50 miles was something. There were two Frank Lloyd Wright houses in this little town of 25,000 people, which was a farm town. They were not only in this little town, they were on my street, which was South Harrison Street. And when I was 9 years old, Christmas of 1953, under the tree, Santa left a maroon-colored J.C. Higgins 3-speed bicycle. And when spring came, there I am sailing down South Harrison, which slopes gently downhill, with my Spalding ball mitt hooked to the handlebars. And over to the right appear these huge monstrosities. These houses looked as if they had come down from Mars. There was nothing else in this little farm town that remotely looked like these two, but especially the larger one, which is in every Frank Lloyd Wright guidebook there is. It's called the B. Harley Bradley, and it's 1900, and it is the forerunner, the St. John the Baptist, so to speak, the progenitor of his great prairie period. And I don't want to romanticize this too much, as if to say I had never seen these houses before. Yes, they had appeared in my consciousness, but here was a 9-year-old on his new bike with his newfound freedom, sailing. Why was I sailing down South Harrison? Because I was going to the baseball park that was nearby. And okay, I'm a storyteller, but one way or another, there's real truth here. I kind of screeched to a stop and looked over. My goodness. Well, there was no way, Roswell, my pea brain of 9 years old could absorb what was going on with that particular B. Harley Bradley house. But something got in. And because I'm a slow learner, it only took about 6.5 decades for it to loop around and find me as a book, as a storytelling object. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
What fascinated you? Was it his architecture or his life?
Oh boy, wonderful question. It's the intersection of both, isn't it? You know, I don't really write, and I'll make this answer shorter. I don't really write true biographies. And I'm not an architectural historian by any stretch. I'm an old, ink-stained reporter, happily, gratefully, from the Washington Post. I have to get obsessively grounded in the facts, but gosh, I got interested in the life. Yes, I was seduced by the architecture, the overwhelming lines and the beauty of that particular house with its great stretched out horizontal lines, replicating the great American prairie that I was growing up on. Now, I didn't understand it that way. Years later, when I began discovering this Byzantine, impossible life he led, I mean, it's a storyteller's dream. Not that I um, uh, did it as well as I would have liked, and a lot of critics would have liked, by the way, but I gave it my all. It is the intersection of both. It's the work and the life that fascinate me.
Speaking of his life, his architecture, most people could probably name one or two or more of his creations, but not a lot of people know about Frank Lloyd Wright's legendary life. If you had to sum him up to the average person who doesn't know anything about it, how would you describe him?
Do you remember those toys when we grew up that were weighted at the bottom? They were kind of 4 or 5 feet high, made of plastic. You could punch them and they would pop right back up.
Absolutely.
This man survived more disasters than any 10 lives put together. This book is entitled Plagued by Fire. He was plagued by fire his entire life, literally. I mean, it's a literal idea as well as a metaphorical idea, but life was burning down all around him, burning down the homes that he lived in. His most beloved home in Wisconsin burned down twice and almost a third. But disaster after disaster. There was murder. There was um, you asked about, is it the architecture? Is it the life? I mean, they cross-pollinate constantly. For him to have survived what he did is stunningly heroic. Is it an admirable life? That's a large no, I think.
Yeah, you just mentioned that Frank Lloyd Wright said, and you write it in your book, all my life I've been plagued by fire. All my life I've been plagued by fire. You also wrote that Frank Lloyd Wright was attracted by fire. Why do you think so? I mean, was it his upbringing? Was it just his moral compass? Where does he land on this scale?
He said that all my life I've been plagued by fire when he was a very old man attending the wedding of his last child. And he was married 3 times, and there was many other lovers and liaisons in between. His last child, her name was Giovanna, and she was getting married, and he had had so many experiences of fire. And at the wedding of his last child, her bridal veil caught fire. It was at a Greek Orthodox church, and the minister was going with the incense boat around her, and somehow the coals caught her veil on fire, and his apprentices and his fellows leapt forward and put it out. And then they went on with the ceremony. And this old man in his white ice cream suit in the back of the church is pacing back and forth with his cane, muttering to himself and shaking his head. All my life I've been plagued by fire. All my life I've been plagued by fire. But he never knew why. He couldn't figure it out. Um, he sometimes wondered in his deepest, darkest moments if it wasn't Old Testament vengeance for his quote sins. You know, he ran away with the client, with the wife of one of his clients. This is 1909. And he abandoned the family in Oak Park, Illinois, he was living with. This was his first family, his first wife. And he ran away. It was the scandal of scandals in Oak Park, Illinois. It was the scandal nationally, because by then, so the B. Harley Bradley in Kankakee, Illinois is 1900. By 1909, he's built all these prairie houses, which make him, he's pretty world famous by 1909. And he just abandons his family.
I'm glad you brought that up, just because you focus a lot on the most infamous fire of his estate in Wisconsin. And maybe just to set that story up, I want you to just tell our viewers, who is Mamah Cheney?
Mamah Cheney and her husband, Edwin, were clients of Frank Lloyd Wright, and they lived 6 streets away. And he built them a house, and he fell in love with Mamah and vice versa. And in 1909, he up and bolted from sedate Oak Park with Mamah, and they flee to Europe.
And Mamah has a big part in the tragedy that happened in Wisconsin.
So
what happened?
Now it's 5 years later. We jump from 1909 and the abandoning of your family and the running away to Europe. You're back in America now, and Frank and Mamah are living at Taliesin in Spring Green, Wisconsin. Taliesin is a Welsh name because Wright comes from, on his mother's side, he's descended from a long line of Welsh preachers. He has built himself a magnificent home, a prairie home called Taliesin, and a deranged African-American domestic servant working in the house went inexplicably berserk in the middle of the summer of 1914, and in probably less than 20 minutes torched the house and murdered with a shingling hatchet Mamah, first of all, Wright's lover, because they weren't married, and then hatcheting her 2 children and other people in the house. A total of 7 people ended up losing their lives at the hands of this deranged Black servant named Julian Carleton. One of the things that I tried very hard to do, Roswell, in this book, was come to terms with who was Julian Carleton. Because for all of these oceans of books that have been written about Wright, biographies, novels, operettas, acres of newspaper articles, Julian Carleton was always treated like a kind of cartoon of madness. And it was thought, and by Wright himself, that he was from somewhere in the Caribbean. The headline the next day in the Chicago Tribune, blaring all the way across the page, a Barbados Negro with a hand axe yesterday. Well, no. He wasn't from Barbados or Haiti or Cuba or anywhere else. He was from our own country. He was from the backwoods of Alabama, and then later Birmingham, and then migrated in the Great Migration up to Chicago and ended up working for Wright. One of the things I tried so hard to do, and I will acknowledge feeling proud of it, was trying to 3-dimensionalize Julian Carleton and make him other than a kind of cipher of history, a kind of cipher of madness. And
Along with
he was a complex human being.
Yeah, along with him, I think he did a good job humanizing Frank Lloyd Wright and all the people who lived in his in the homes that he designed and all the people that surrounded him. And why was that important for you to illustrate these folks, including Julian?
You know, I said a while ago that I don't seem to write true biographies. I write a version of what you might call group biographies. They are portraits of a person and a place and a time, but streaming in are all these other lives. Who was May Mancini? Who was Julian Carlton? And other people connected with his life, the whom I wanted to come to terms with. And in a sense, here is a kind of flip way of saying it. I was trying to reveal him, in a sense, through his clients. I was trying to reveal him, in a sense, through his other associates. I was trying to reveal him, in a sense, through the woman he ran. I was trying to reveal him, in a sense, reveal him through the man who torched his home to cinders and axe murdered his lover, which was his truest love, May Mancini. If I put him in the center of the story and keep bringing in like spokes to the hub of the wheel, all these other stories that fascinate me.
I do want to ask you about his work. You said you wrote very nicely in your book, and I just want to quote it. You said, Frank Lloyd Wright was out to break the box. He wanted to let light and space in, air in, life in. He definitely did it, I believe, with his architecture, but was he able to do that with his personal life and with the people that he interacted with and lived with and, grown up with?
You know, he was the son of he was a son of the prairie, what we might call the flyovers. He loved the prairie, and what he wanted to do was open up his houses to let light in, to let space in. If you're building a house on the flat prairies of Illinois, you got plenty of room, as opposed to New York City, where you have to go straight up. And in a sense, his houses are manifest destiny. They go from east to west. They go across the country, metaphorically. This is why he said he wanted to break the box. He wanted to get us out of those tight, stuffy, hair horse hided furniture, boxy living rooms in those old Victorian houses that were musty and didn't have enough windows and light. And he wanted to break apart that box and tear down those walls and let light in and space in and let America in.
Speaking go ahead. My
No,
apologies.
no.
I did want to ask you because you brought up, he left his wife. He's had a very colorful life, and you ended your prologue or your introduction in the book by asking this question. I feel like you were asking it to yourself. Are character and art correlated? Now, after writing about Frank Lloyd Wright and Hemingway, who also lived a very colorful life, were you able to answer that question?
I love your term colorful. It's so, yes, colorful. We could think of a few other adjectives. You know, it's such a tricky question. You could say Frank Sinatra, horrible life, but does anyone sing better? Frank Lloyd Wright, right. A lot of men in pulpits would say he led an immoral life. And yet we have this work. I do believe, and ditto Hemingway, I do believe that it would be impossible to create the kind of soulful soaring, majestic buildings, if you're Frank Lloyd Wright, or iconic American sentences, if you're Ernest Hemingway. If you do not possess at base a decency and a generosity, I might even go so far as to say, and let the listeners of this program, if it ever gets aired, let them laugh me off the stage. I might even go so far as to say these men were on a search for their sainthood, and they defeated themselves at every turn.
I can't let you go, Paul, without talking about the work that you did in all the research you did in writing this book. In the acknowledgement section, there's a big chunk of it that's dedicated to thanking all the institutions and libraries that help you do your research, including the Library of Congress. And what was so appealing, and what did you find here at the library that you were able to incorporate in your book?
Do you know, I've written 7 books, and I'm working on my 8th. And who knows if I'll get to complete it. I'm an old coot. But as my Kentucky father used to say, it keeps me out of taverns. And I'm talking to you from Western Kentucky, where my late father grew up. I'm doing a book about my father and his night fighter squadron in World War II. And I have every belief part of it will be researched in the Library of Congress. Those 7 books have all, one way or another, been researched in the Library of Congress. I was telling one of your associates, we lived on 10th Street Southeast, 10 blocks behind the 3 magnificent Library of Congress buildings, the Jefferson, the Madison, and the Adams. I know those tunnels between those 3 buildings. I've had Carol's desks in the Library of Congress. I've come to know reference librarians in the Library of Congress. Every one of these books, the one about civil rights called Sons of Mississippi, the one about Vietnam called The Living and the Dead, the Hemingway book, the Frank Lloyd Wright book, my very first book, a memoir of my Catholic seminary years. In one way or another, the Library of Congress played into the fact that these works got done at all. I have such deep gratitude to the Library of Congress. It's as if we've saved here the best wine until last. I have to lower my voice and say reverently that all gratitude to this library, this most magnificent library in the world. And yet, Roswell, yes, man, I've been in libraries all over America. And before we started airing today, I was saying that librarians are God's gift to the world, because what are they getting out of it when you kind of come breathless to them at the reference desk? Can you help me with this? There's Frank Lloyd Wright research papers are everywhere in this country, from the most powerful museums, the Avery Library at Columbia University or the Getty Museum on the West Coast. But the Library of Congress, there were materials, there were documents in the library, in special collections that helped me get the Frank Lloyd Wright book done. So what kind of a cad would I be if in my acknowledgments I did not try to figuratively get on my knees and say, thank you, thank you.
Well, we want to thank you. We want to thank you for all the research you've done here at the library. We want to thank you for your support of this great institution, and we're hoping that we'll see you in person again soon. But I just want to end on a quote that you write by Frank Lloyd Wright of one of the items that you found here at the Library of Congress. You said that Frank Lloyd Wright, he said, quote, "Someday America may live her own life in her own buildings, in her own way." And it looks like Frank Lloyd Wright definitely lived his own way. Thank you again, Paul Hendrickson.
It's a beautiful quote to end on. Thank you very much.
Hope you enjoyed that conversation. Now here's my colleague Gary Johnson from Serials.
Thank you, Roswell. My name is Gary Johnson, and I am a reference librarian in the Serial and Government Publications Division at the Library of Congress. Our division operates the newspaper and current periodical reading room located in room 133 of the Madison Building. I'd like to briefly describe the materials in our division's collections and the reference services we provide to researchers. As the name of our reading room suggests, we hold the library's collection of U.S. and foreign newspapers, which are available in a variety of formats, including print, microform, and in databases. We provide access to the most recent 2 years of print format scholarly journals and popular magazines, in addition to periodicals and electronic databases. Our comic book collection is the largest publicly available collection in the world. We also have government documents, United Nations documents, and an open reference collection that focuses on journalism, politics and government, and research related to periodicals such as newspaper and periodical indexes. The newspaper and periodical reading room provides computer workstations for research in the thousands of databases provided by the library and microfilm scanners for producing digital files or prints from microfilm. Tables are available to accommodate the examination of large bound volumes of newspapers. An overhead scanner is available to scan print documents. We also provide an Ask a Librarian service and a daily live chat session to assist remote researchers. What are you looking for, and how can we help you? In the case of Paul Hendrickson and his book about Frank Lloyd Wright entitled Plagued by Fire, the author's initial contact with our reading room in 2014 concerned newspaper stories about Wright's abandonment of his family and elopement with a client's wife. About a year later, Hendrickson was looking for a newspaper story about the horrific crime at Wright's Spring Green, Wisconsin home, which took place in August 1914. Although the person who committed the crime was known, there was uncertainty about the perpetrator's true identity. We recommended consulting with the genealogy specialist in the library's local history and genealogy section. Further contact was made with a genealogist from the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. Hendrickson's curiosity, creativity, imagination, and persistence, coupled with the expertise and guidance of these specialists, resulted in the discovery of significant new information about this important event in the life of Frank Lloyd Wright. What can we help you discover? To learn more, please visit our website at loc.gov. Thank you.